Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6 p.m. time for News Bulletin on Channel 2. I'm Sora Slim presenting to you the news, starting with the headlines. Welcome back to the news in details. Egypt marks today the Labor Day, and on this occasion, Minister of Labor Mohammed Gubran offered sincere greetings to Egyptian laborers who are the builders of the new republic, wishing many good and prosperous returns of the day to Egypt under the leadership of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The minister said that the recently approved law on labor reflects the political leadership's keenness on the issuance of a balanced law between two parties to the productive process, achieving the work safety for workers and creating an attracting investment atmosphere. Gubran pointed out that the new law is a gift for laborers on their day, clarifying that the new labor law will come into force once ratified by President Sisi and the executive regulations of which will be issued. He hailed Egyptian laborers being of the most skilled worldwide, thus the state is keen to develop their skills in line with the market needs. The minister revealed that Egypt will be launching the national strategy for operation in order to handle all challenges. From Tokyo to Taipei and Manila, people across Asia marked today May Day with marches and protests that spotlighted the growing unease over U.S. President Donald Trump's policies and fears of global economic stability. Recognized by dozens of countries around the world, Labor Day has been consolidated over the decades as an ubiquitous part of the annual calendar. Also known as the International Workers' Day, Labor Day is often seen as possessing a strongly European character, but the occasion traces its roots to the two other continents. On 21 April 1856, stonemasons in Melbourne, Australia, protested what they deemed were untenable labor conditions. The workers eventually scored a victory, reaching an agreement with employers that led to the establishment of the 8-hour workday. This success served as an impetus for further actions, especially in the United States. Labor Day also has its foundations in North America, where a violent crackdown on protesters in Chicago in May 1886 saw numerous deaths and injuries after a peaceful rally in support for workers striking for the 8-hour workday. By the end of the 19th century, many European countries had taken inspiration, and May Day has become a global event. Minister of Foreign Migration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs, Dr. Badr Abdel-Ati, today said that Egypt fully supports Sudan's security, stability, and territorial integrity, asserting its solidarity with its neighbor in such a critical time. Egypt's top diplomat made these remarks in a phone call with newly appointed Sudanese Foreign Minister Omar Siddiq, where he greeted him on assuming the post and reiterated Egypt's keen interest in drumming up regional and international efforts aiming to end the suffering of the Sudanese people. The phone call also touched on enhancing bilateral ties with the two diplomats, agreeing on intensified consultations over the upcoming period. Welcome back. The Palestinian Civil Defense Agency said today that Israeli occupation bombardment killed at least 24 people since midnight in the war-ravaged Gaza Strip, which has been under an Israeli occupation aid blockade for nearly 2 months. The agency said the toll included 8 people killed in an Israeli occupation airstrike on a family home in Khan Yunis refugee camp in the territory's south. 4 others were killed in an airstrike in Gaza City's Al-Tufah neighborhood, while at least 12 people were killed in 7 separate attacks across the Palestinian enclave, including one that hit a tent sheltering displaced people near the central city of Deir al-Balah. The Israeli occupation resumed its military offensive in the Gaza Strip on March 18 after a 2-month truce collapsed. At least 2,326 people have been killed since then, bringing the overall death toll of 18-month genocide war to 52,418 martyrs. A U.S. official from the State Department legal team has told the International Court of Justice there were serious concerns about the impartiality of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. The World Court judges are holding a week of hearings to help them formulate an advisory opinion on the Israeli occupation's obligations toward UN agencies delivering aid to Palestinians in Gaza. Around 40 nations, including Egypt and organizations such as the League of the Arab States, are taking part in the hearings where the status of UNRWA is in focus. The Israeli occupation strictly controls all inflows of international aid vital for Palestinians in Gaza since March 2, days before the collapse of a ceasefire that had significantly reduced hostilities after 18 months of genocide war. Several countries were sending firefighting aircraft to the Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories today as crews battled for a second day to extinguish a wildfire that had shut down a major highway linking the Palestinian cities Jaffa and Al-Quds, known in Hebrew as Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and sent drivers scrambling from their cars. The fire broke out around midday in the hills outside the occupied old city of Al-Quds yesterday, fueled by hot dry conditions and fanned by strong winds that quickly whipped up the flames burning through pine forests. Several settlements were evacuated as a precaution as the fire reportedly burned about 20 square kilometers, the most significant fire the Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories has seen in the past decade. The Syrian Foreign Ministry said that the country rejects all forms of foreign intervention in its affairs, stressing commitment to Project All Syrian Sects. Meanwhile, the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, condemned the unacceptable violence rocking the country after deadly clashes and called for an immediate halt to the Israeli occupation airstrikes. The UN envoy was alarmed at the potential for further escalation of the situation after violent clashes around Damascus and Homs and after the Israeli occupation strikes near the Syrian capital. Pedersen called for immediate measures to ensure the protection of civilians, bring about calm and prevent incitement of tensions in the country. Lebanon's health ministry said that 3 people were killed in an Israeli occupation drone strike on a vehicle in the country's south today, despite a ceasefire agreement between Hezbollah and the Israeli occupation forces. The November truce deal was based on a UN Security Council resolution that says Lebanese troops and the United Nations peacekeepers should be the only forces in South Lebanon. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned Iran that it will face consequences for supporting the Houthis, a group that has struck shipping in the Red Sea in solidarity with the Palestinians facing an unprecedented aggression from the Israeli occupation forces. The U.S. top official's warning comes even as the United States has relaunched talks with Iran over its nuclear program due to reconvene in Rome next Saturday. It also comes as the British military launched airstrikes with the United States targeting Yemen's Houthi group, their first attack in Washington's new intense campaign targeting the group. The United States and Ukraine signed a minerals deal after a 2-month delay in what President Donald Trump's administration called a new form of U.S. commitment to Kyiv after the end of military aid. Ukraine said it secured key interests after protracted negotiations, including full sovereignty over its own rare earth, which are vital for new technologies and largely untapped. Trump had initially demanded rights to Ukraine's mineral wealth as compensation for the billions of dollars in U.S. weapons sent under former President Joe Biden. Moving to the economic and business sector, in which Deputy Prime Minister for Industrial Development, Minister of Industry and Transportation Kamel al-Wazir stressed his ministry's keenness to finalize development projects in Upper Egypt financed by the World Bank. The minister's remarks were made as he shared an expanded meeting with companies implementing the projects to follow up the work pace and achievements in the development projects. Kamel al-Wazir said that the development projects carried out in Upper Egypt are part of a number of joint mega projects between Egypt and the World Bank within the state's comprehensive plan for industrial and economic development nationwide. Chinese media sources said today that the United States has approached China seeking talks over President Donald Trump's 145% tariffs, potentially signaling Beijing's openness to negotiations. Trump said in a U.S. media interview published last Friday that his administration was talking with China to reach a tariff deal and that Chinese President Xi Jinping had called him. Beijing last week repeatedly denied such talks were taking place, accusing Washington of misleading the public. Punishing U.S. tariffs that have reached 145% on many Chinese products came into force in April, while Beijing has responded with fresh 125% duties on imports from the United States. Oil prices fell today in thin holiday trading following weak U.S. economic data that added to growth concerns. West Texas Intermediate was down 3% at $59.38 per barrel. Oil plunged under $60 per barrel, weighed down by disappointing economic data from the U.S. and on expectations that OPEC Plus will increase production more than expected in June. That's all for now. Stay tuned for the coming updates on the top of the hour. Thank you for watching.